But I think interestingly, in the blue collar workers are probably the most protected in many ways in this current revolution because how do you automate a field service worker's job, right? Like, in a factory, a different scenario, you can see how you can automate many of those types of jobs, but a lot of the blue collar work is not done in a factory, right? It is done elsewhere on the front lines, and that's very difficult. And I think the trend that we'll see over the 6 months, the 6 year time frame is about augmentation, not automation.
Thank you for listening to the Ask AI podcast. To get our latest episodes, AI news, discount codes for events, and links to free resources, sign up to our monthly newsletter by visiting askai.org and clicking the subscribe link. That's askai.org.
Hello, everybody. This is Elena from Ask AI. And today with me is Gabe Batstone, who is a CEO and co-founder of Contextere, which is a company that provides AI to empower human performance in industrial settings. So this is about productivity, this is about safety, this is about what the workers can do better in industrial setting, which is different from what we usually hear about AI. So I'm very excited about that. Welcome, Gabe.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to talk about Contextere, Elena. I really appreciate it. And we do certainly have a different approach to AI. In addition to being human centric, as you said, we have what we call blue collar AI, a real focus on the people who put warm hands on cold steel. They install, they maintain, they repair, they inspect complex equipment. And those are the things that make sure buildings run, planes fly, trains roll, equipment operates, but often not understood and often left behind previous technological revolutions.
These are so essential, right? Because we all take these elevators and we live in these buildings, right? And we turn on these lights. So super important. So when you say that we have a slightly different approach, tell me more about that.
Well, in the old days, old days being 2015 when we founded the company, there was a lot of talk about machines and AI taking everyone's job, right? And so I used to call it Iron
So
Man
wait.
versus
You
Skynet.
mean this message is not new?
But I was on a panel in Europe not too long ago at NATO, and the presenter I was with, I will not name, but had said, AI is not new. It's been around for like 10 years, and I just kind of paused and thought, well, close, more like since 1950. So there's a lot of recency bias when it comes to all of these things. And in 2015, the bias was that, hey, there's going to be no jobs left. AI is going to do everything, and the robots versus the humans, and elements of that still exist today. But I think it's become pretty obvious that it'll be the collaboration of humans and AI and humans and machine that is the future of work, not one or the other. And I used to always say Skynet versus Iron Man. I said there's too many people out there trying to build Skynet where AI does everything and not enough people trying to create the Iron Men and Iron Woman of the future, right? Let's use AI to empower humans, right?
So let's just go back to 2015 when you started a company. What did AI look like then?
So it didn't look anything like it does now. I can say that. And in fact, when the technology we were most focused on then was less AI and more IoT,
Oh,
right? It
sure.
was
I
about
remember that term. Yeah. Internet
yeah,
of
the Internet of
Things.
Things. And the IIoT, the industrial Internet of Things, some people were calling it. And for us, because that was really a precursor to our vision of supporting blue collar workers, was there has to be communication, right? The machines have to be
Yeah.
able to talk, and you need the devices and the hardware to be with the humans on the last mile. And so we were very focused on that. And AI was traditional AI, right? Which has been around forever, doing smart things, curating data,
Yeah.
surfacing data. But it wasn't the chat side of it was not there. And it's funny, we had named our product, which is now Madison, but in 2017, we named it an intelligent personal agent, which is kind
Which
of
it
funny. And then
was.
yes, yeah, and now 8 years later, everything's an agent. Innovator's dilemma. You're always too early. It's we were so early we abandoned that term and moved on. And that's funny. And now we call it Madison. We named our agent Madison. So things looked a lot different then. And of course, we've had a few events such as a pandemic that also reshaped things in between.
So that's a very good point. How did pandemic change the AI development in the industrial setting?
The one impact for Contextere in particular that changed was the pandemic, I think, taught the general public just how important people, frontline workers, and workers on the last mile are. And some of that taken for granted that we started this conversation with, some of those lines finally got blurred because we found out, oh, you know what can't be done from your home? Field service, repairing things. Our
Yes.
dependence on those people who work on the front lines went up. And so, from our perspective, that was a good thing, right? Is the recognition that those jobs are hard, they're important, and the people who do them are skilled, by the way, right? And there's
Course.
often this idea that white collar work is for the smart people and blue collar work is for everyone else. And I think people started to recognize, no, blue collar work, although it's hard and with your hands often, it also requires what's between your ears, right? You have to be smart and you have to be able to work on really difficult problems. And by the way, if blue collar workers can't do their jobs, nobody else can either, because that's how the whole society
Yes.
operates.
Yes, and I would actually add another one to this is problem solve under stress.
Yeah,
Because very often when you talk about the type of events that the blue collar industrial workers have to deal with, they're impactful.
absolutely. And they're unpredictable. So not in headquarters, you're not in a factory, you're not in your home office. So you're out wherever that equipment might be, and you've really got to troubleshoot with a limited set of tools and access. And AI now starts to bridge that. Well, if we can bring all of that curated knowledge and enterprise knowledge and machine knowledge and sensors and bring it together to help that worker, right, then we can really start to have an impact. And that was a bit of the vision of Contextere. Before Contextere had a name, me and my co-founder Carl Byers, and we can never remember who said it to whom, but at some point we were in San Francisco walking under the Golden Gate Bridge. I think it was Presidio Park, and one of us said to the other, "Is like, what if you could just talk to equipment?" And that was this idea of
What
like,
if?
wouldn't life be easier? What if? And then we started to trouble. Well, it's like, well, if IoT worked, and if you had some AI, and we started to troubleshoot it. So to speak. And that's where Contextere really was born, from that kind of idea of like, if we could just talk to equipment, wouldn't life be easier?
Wow. All right. So started with IoT, then this milestone in San Francisco where you decided that you're going to talk to equipment. Fast forward to now, Madison. What does Madison do?
So Madison is essentially an insight engine and a blue collar copilot in today's terminology. And so what that means is Madison is able to curate industrial data from all the different sources it comes from, and then surface relevant insights and actionable intelligence to the people on the last mile so that they can install, maintain, repair, inspect complex equipment safely and productively. And so, we used to call it in some ways a curation engine, because, there's lots of misnomers about the blue collar workers. And one is, well, if something breaks, why don't they just look in the manual? There are many thousands of pages. The other thing is, if you actually look at the amount of information required to troubleshoot complex equipment, it tends to be 12 or 15 different places that you have to go. You need to look at Salesforce, you need to look at SAP, you need to look at the manual, but you also need to see if there are service bulletins. You also
Oh,
would be nice if you could read the data off the machine to know what the machine's doing in the moment. It would also be useful to have previous customer records. And you go on, and it takes 20, 30, sometimes an hour to actually gather that information before you've even started to try to solve the
yeah.
problem. And whatever is working is not working, be that an
Yeah.
elevator or a cell phone tower or an airplane. And that turns into money. And that's where the value proposition comes in, is time is money when you get to the front lines. And you need to fix this equipment fast for a whole variety of reasons. So our blue collar copilot is able to provide that real-time intelligence to people on the last mile so that they get the job done quicker, safer, better, and they can move on to whatever's next.
Wow. And for customers, in what industries do you see Madison making the biggest difference?
Yeah, we kind of put our walled garden around, where are you going to focus? And so a little bit of that was based on our experience. One of my favorite quotes is, where you stand depends on where you sit. So
Yeah.
often, we sat and we came from the aerospace and defense industry. So we naturally started in aerospace and defense. And so Lockheed Martin was our first flagship customer,
Wow.
because I'd worked with them for many years on F-35 and other programs. But obviously, we then kind of said, well, there's more to it than that. And kind of being anyone who has large assets, complex equipment, and cares about maintenance. So if you don't care about maintenance, right, it's a disposable item, then you're not going to invest in solutions to sustain it. So you'll tend to find us in aerospace and defense, oil and gas, the energy sector, power generation, anywhere where there's large assets that last a long time, and preferably in mission critical regulated industries. Again, then you really care about sustainment in a way that other industries don't. So that's where we focus our time. And so our main, the people that we work with tend to be Fortune 500 companies. Our experiences coming from aerospace is we're used to working with big companies. So unlike maybe traditional, technology companies, we come actually from the industrial world. We just
Yeah.
happen to do technology. So, we work with ABB, Carrier, Lockheed Martin. Those kind of companies are right in our sweet spot.
Very interesting. So the buying persona, right, is either management or finance department of a huge corporation. The user is a frontline worker, right? So what do they tell you? Before I used Madison, my life was like this and my work was like that. And now, what's now?
So now it's I don't have to waste so much time looking for information and then not
Well,
even being sure if it's right. And so we're able to reduce uncertainty. And nobody likes uncertainty, right? Like, because even
sure.
if they eventually navigate to the right piece of document, they're like, well, is this the most recent version? Right. And so, and there were lots of initiatives. One of our first customers, Carrier, they had developed many apps, right, to help the field service workers get information. And that was the problem. They had many apps, and we had them when we believe, and you need to work with your workers, right? You have to go out there. And so I was riding along with service techs in Connecticut and all over the Northeast US. One of the things they said is, look, here we are. We're in the attic of a middle school building trying to fix the air conditioner. A bunch of angry parents and students, right? Because there's no AC on right now. And it said, and I have 17 different applications that I could potentially find the answer I'm looking for. I don't have time to open 17 apps, right? Like, I just need to get my question answered. And that was a learning point for us too, to be honest. We didn't have voice as a essential part of Madison back in 2017, right? We just thought, well, you'll type it in or you'll do, and the workers were like, no, that's not how we operate. Like, when we like to talk, right? If we run into a problem, we're gonna phone someone, and that person's gonna tell us. So we need to be able to talk. And so we put, it's our technology has evolved not only just from our ideas, but actually real last mile feedback from those users. And at the end of the day, what they care most about is time. And they also have a passion for their work, right? Is they want to do the work. They don't want to go be surfing through a manual.
That was an amazing feedback, I have to say. And the co-creation process here is really pretty amazing. I want to ask you about something else, and that is safety.
Well, the reality is, when you don't have easy access to the information, right, that's required to do the job, a couple of things will happen. One is you won't do the job, right? And that's not good, obviously, productivity. But sometimes worse is that you will try to do the job, right? But you don't have the right information. And that comes with risk, risk to the equipment, but also risk to you, right? To the
Yes.
safety of the personnel. And that became starkly important, I would say, over the last 5 or 10 years, as the demographic shift of the experienced people, right, in the blue collar industries tend to be retiring, those baby boomers. And we have a new generation of workers who don't have that experience and tacit knowledge that keeps them safe available. And so now through Madison, we can provide some of that knowledge to keep them safe, because we don't want people operating equipment not being sure what they're doing or taking chances, right? You want everybody to have the most important information at their fingertips to get the job done right. And so that's where that safety aspect is just so critical. And there's a second layer to that, of course, is in mission critical industries. It's not just the safety of the worker, but if you're an airplane mechanic, it's the safety of the
Yes.
people who are going to get on that
Yes.
plane. If you work at a nuclear power plant, it's the safety of the nearby region, right? So all of these pieces of equipment, it's the safety of the worker, but also the safety of the people who are dependent on that asset for whatever it might be doing.
It's very interesting how, even in the conversation that you are and I are having, I could see how AI is evolving in the industrial sector and how it's simplifying and making the jobs of the frontline workers not necessarily easier, but more, how do I say it, efficient, right? Faster, right? So we can see a very large positive difference AI is making. And also, as you mentioned, training the younger generation of the workforce on the safety procedures and on what needs to be done. How do you foresee AI changing the work in this segment moving forward in 6 months, a year, 5 years?
I think an interesting part of the debate of like job loss, and there is always transition with AI, right? And I don't, and innovation in general, and I don't think we should ever minimize that, because there'll always be parts of the population that we need to take care of during these technological revolutions. And even though the net job gains will always be positive, there will be losers, right? And we need to make sure that we take care of those people, whether it's through retraining or other government programs, and to do that. But I think interestingly, in the blue collar workers are probably the most protected in many ways in this current revolution, because how do you automate a field service worker's job, right? Like to get into a truck and then drive to
Of
a
course.
location and then, right? Like, in a factory, a different scenario, you can see how you can automate many of those types of jobs, but a lot of the blue collar work is not done in a factory, right? It is done elsewhere on the front lines, and that's very difficult. And that's where we talk a lot about, and this is to your question, I think the trend that we'll see over the 6 months, the 6 year time frame is about augmentation, not automation, right? Is like, how do we use AI and technology more generally to augment the workers so that they get the job done right the first time, safely and efficiently? And it won't be about automating those workers. I think the automation in the short term is more a white collar challenge that we'll have to look at
Yep,
from a
yep.
job perspective. But in the short term, I think in the blue collar world, it's really going to be a lot about augmentation.
Makes sense. Well, I also think it has a lot to do with the fact that there are shortages of certain blue collar professions. So, in certain professions, it's not even going to be, AI displacing workers, but AI helping to satisfy deficiencies and just
Yeah,
get the job done that should have been done because we're sitting on certain amount of tech debt because it should have been addressed or certain progress should be done.
absolutely. Like in many of our customers that we talk to, the challenge or one of the drivers for the return on investment, like how they invest, is that one of their limiters to growth is that there aren't enough people to scale on the blue collar side to support the equipment that they would like to sell. Like there's no possible way we can have enough technical customer support folks who can maintain this machinery. Just if we're going to double our growth, where are those people going to come from? And so again, maybe with AI, it's not replacing jobs, it's allowing the existing workforce to do more, right? And so that allows you to grow as you retrain and bring more people into it. But you make an excellent point. The conversation that dominates most workforce generation talks in the blue collar world is, where are the workers, not how do we get rid of them.
Yes. Well, this is an amazing conversation. Thank you so much, Gabe. I learned a lot. One of the things that I actually have two points that I'd like to take home with me. One is the amazing story about your core user feedback on your product development, where they changed their work from 17 apps, right, that they need to deal with and or manuals to a product that actually talks to them and interacts with them via interface that they prefer, right? So this was amazing. And the second, actually, our conversation about the opportunity of AI being a help in a workforce deficiency situations, right? Where there is flat out not enough certain type of workers, in this specific case, blue collar field workers, where AI can just help us address issues that should be addressed already. So this is my take. And on your end, what would you say would be your parting message to our audience?
Well, I think that one of my favorite quotes, I'll leave with that, is from a French economist, since we started with a little French. No bad time for that as a Canadian, but it's a wealth of data creates a poverty of attention. And I think that in the industrial world, in our personal lives, if you really think about that, and that quote is from 1971, and I would argue there is a
Apparently,
lot more
that is
wealth of
new
data.
either, right?
Yeah. And we do have a wealth of data, and it has created a poverty of attention, and it behooves all of us to use the tools available to us to simplify that, because until you get to the meat of the matter, it's hard to make good decisions. And I think that's the real power of AI, is allowing all of us to make better decisions in whatever context we're in.
Yeah, and Madison is allowing industrial safety, industrial workers to make better decisions. So it was a great pleasure talking to you today. Thanks so much, and hopefully we will chat again in a few months.
Thank you, Elena. It was great to
Thank
share the
you.
story, and take care.
Thanks for tuning in to Ask AI, your guide to spotting opportunities and navigating challenges in the era of artificial intelligence. Since 2017, our independent nonprofit has brought together experts, volunteers, and innovators to share balanced insights on AI and the transformation of work. Stay curious, stay informed, and keep asking AI. You can access more free resources and subscribe to our newsletter at askai.org. That's askai.org.